The clock on the wall showed 10:47 p.m. when David pushed his cleaning cart through the heavy oak doors of Riverside Concert Hall. The audience had left hours ago, but the smell of expensive perfume and polished wood still hung in the air. He didn't mind working late. Actually, he preferred it. The silence of the empty hall gave him time to think, and thinking was something he did a lot these days. David had been cleaning this place for almost 3 years now. Every seat, every aisle, every corner of this grand building had become familiar to him. He knew which floorboards creaked, which lights flickered, and exactly how long it took to mop the entire lobby. But most of all, he knew the stage. That beautiful, massive stage where some of the world's greatest musicians performed. Tonight had been special. A famous pianist from New York had played to a sold-out crowd. David had caught glimpses of the performance while taking out trash from the upper balcony. The music had made him stop in his tracks more than once. It always did. There was something about live piano music that grabbed him by the chest and wouldn't let go. He started his usual routine, working from the back of the hall toward the front. Row by row he picked up programs, swept popcorn, and wiped down armrests. His hands moved automatically after doing this job for so long. His mind, though, was somewhere else entirely. It was on his daughter Lily, who was probably fast asleep at his neighbor's apartment right now. Lily was 8 years old, and she was everything to him. Every single thing. Her laugh, her questions, the way she drew pictures of them together with a big sun smiling in the corner. She was the reason he got up every morning, the reason he worked 2 jobs, the reason he kept going even when his body felt like giving up. Life hadn't always been like this. 2 years ago, everything changed. His wife Jennifer had been sick for almost a year before she passed. Cancer. The word still made his stomach twist. They'd tried everything, spent money they didn't have, prayed prayers that felt like they disappeared into empty air. But in the end, she was gone, and he was left with a mountain of medical debt and a little girl who kept asking when Mommy was coming home. The insurance covered some of it, but not enough. Never enough. David had to make a choice, and he made it fast. He took the first job he could find that paid regularly. Then he took a second one on weekends at the grocery store down the street. Between both jobs, he could just barely keep their small apartment and put food on the table. But tonight, as he swept the aisles of this beautiful concert hall, he allowed himself to remember who he used to be. Before the bills, before the grief, before the exhaustion that lived in his bones, he used to play piano, not just play it. He lived it, breathed it, dreamed it. Years ago, David had won a full scholarship to the city's music conservatory. His teachers said he had something special, a gift that couldn't be taught. He practiced 8 hours a day sometimes, his fingers flying over keys, his heart soaring with every piece he mastered. Mozart, Beethoven, Chopin, Rachmaninoff. They became his friends, his teachers, his escape. He was going to be a concert pianist. That was the plan. That was the dream. But then his mother got sick, really sick. She needed someone to take care of her, to pay for her medications, to drive her to appointments. His father had left when David was young, and he had no siblings. It was just him. So he left school. He got a regular job. He told himself it was temporary, just until his mother got better. She did get better eventually. But by then, David had met Jennifer. They fell in love fast and deep. Then Lily came along, tiny and perfect and needing everything. The piano became something he used to do, a memory from another life. He told himself he'd go back to it someday. Someday when things were easier. Someday when there was time. Someday never came. Now, pushing his cart toward the stage, David felt that familiar ache in his chest, the one that showed up whenever he was around music. It was like hunger, but deeper, like missing a person you used to be. He climbed the steps to the stage, his work boots heavy on the polished wood. This was always his favorite part of the job. The stage felt sacred somehow, even when it was empty, especially when it was empty. Up here, under the huge crystal chandelier, he could imagine what it felt like to perform. To have hundreds of people watching, listening, feeling what you felt. He started wiping down the conductor's podium, then moved to straighten the chairs where the orchestra had sat. But then he saw it and his heart skipped. The grand piano was still uncovered. Usually after every performance, the stage crew carefully placed a protective cover over the Steinway. It was worth more than David would make in 5 years, maybe 10. The cover protected it from dust and accidental damage. But tonight, in their rush to leave, someone had forgotten. David stood there staring at the instrument. The stage lights were dimmed, but enough light remained that he could see the piano's perfect black surface. Its keys waiting patiently in the semi-darkness. He shouldn't. He knew he shouldn't. His job was to clean, not to touch. The piano wasn't for people like him. It was for the professionals, the ones who'd made it, the ones who deserved to sit at something so beautiful. But his feet were already moving. His cleaning cart forgotten behind him. He approached the piano the way someone might approach an old friend they hadn't seen in years, nervous, excited, scared. They might have changed too much to recognize each other. David's hand touched the smooth wood of the piano's side. It was cool under his palm, real, solid. He walked around to the bench and just looked at it for a long moment. His uniform smelled like cleaning solution and sweat. His hands were rough from work, the nails short and practical. He didn't belong here, but God, how he wanted to. He glanced around the empty hall. The security cameras were there, sure, but who watched footage of a janitor cleaning at 11 at night? His supervisor had gone home hours ago. The building was locked. He was completely alone. Just one song, he told himself, just one, to remember what it felt like. David sat down on the bench. It was positioned perfectly, adjusted to the right height. His hands hovered over the keys, shaking slightly. Not from cold, from anticipation, from fear, from a longing so deep it hurt. He took a breath. Then he placed his fingers on the keys. The first note rang out in the empty hall, pure and clear and achingly beautiful. Then the second. Then the third. And suddenly David wasn't a janitor anymore. He wasn't exhausted or broke or grieving. He wasn't anything except the music that poured from his fingers. He chose Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major, Jennifer's favorite. As he played, his eyes closed. He didn't need to see the keys. His hands remembered. They had never forgotten, not really. All those years, all that time, the music had been waiting inside him, patient and faithful. The melody filled the concert hall, climbing to the high ceiling, wrapping around the empty seats, touching everything. David's shoulders relaxed. His breathing deepened. Tears started sliding down his face, but he barely noticed. This was home. This was who he was supposed to be. He played for Jennifer, remembering her smile. He played for Lily, hoping she'd have chances he never had. He played for himself, for the boy who'd dreamed big and the man who'd sacrificed everything. He played like his life depended on it. Because in a way it did. What David didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that someone was listening. Up in the administrative offices on the second floor, a light was still on. And someone had heard every single note. Margaret Chen had been the concert hall manager for 15 years. She'd heard every excuse, every sob story, every tale of why someone deserved a break or special treatment. After so long in this business, she thought nothing could surprise her anymore. She thought she'd seen everything. She was wrong. Margaret had stayed late that Tuesday night finishing paperwork. Budget reports, scheduling conflicts, vendor contracts. The boring stuff that kept the concert hall running but made her eyes glaze over. She was just about to pack up and head home when she heard it. Music. At first she thought she'd left her computer playing something, but no, her screen was dark. Then she thought maybe the sound system was acting up again, playing a recording from earlier. But this was different. This was live. Someone was actually playing the piano downstairs. Her first reaction was anger. Who the hell was on her stage at this hour? The building was supposed to be empty except for the night cleaning crew. Had someone broken in? Was this some kind of prank? Margaret stood up from her desk, ready to march downstairs and give whoever it was a piece of her mind. But then the music really started and she froze. Chopin, Nocturne in E-flat major, one of the most beautiful pieces ever written, and one of the hardest to play with real feeling. Whoever was down there wasn't just playing it. They were living it. Margaret walked slowly to her office door, then down the hallway to the balcony overlooking the main auditorium. She moved quietly, carefully, not wanting to interrupt. The music grew louder with each step, filling the empty space with so much emotion it made her chest tight. She reached the balcony railing and looked down at the stage. At first, she couldn't process what she was seeing. David, the custodian, the quiet guy who always said good evening and never complained about anything, the one who sometimes worked double shifts when they were short-staffed. He was sitting at the Steinway grand piano in his cleaning uniform, playing like his soul was pouring out through his fingertips. Margaret stood there completely stunned. His eyes were closed. Tears were streaming down his face, but his hands, those rough, work-worn hands, they were moving across the keys with a grace and precision that made her forget how to breathe. She'd been in this business long enough to know talent when she heard it. Real talent. Not just technical skill that anyone could learn with enough practice. This was different. This was artistry. This was someone who understood music from the inside out, who could make you feel things you didn't even know you were carrying around in your heart. Margaret had hosted concerts by world-famous pianists. She'd stood in this exact spot listening to performers who charged $50,000 for a single show. But something about this moment, this unexpected performance in an empty hall by a man in a janitor's uniform, hit her harder than any of those professional concerts ever had. Maybe it was the raw honesty of it. There was no audience to impress, no critics to worry about, no paycheck riding on the performance. This was pure. This was music for music's sake. This was a man playing because he needed to, the way people need air or water. Margaret felt tears starting in her own eyes. When was the last time music had made her cry? She couldn't remember. Years, probably. She'd become so focused on ticket sales and booking schedules that she'd forgotten what this was all about. Why people built concert halls in the first place. Why music mattered. Her hand moved almost on instinct, pulling her phone from her pocket. She knew she should probably look away, give him this private moment. But something told her this needed to be saved, recorded, remembered. She opened her camera app and hit record, being careful to keep the phone steady. The angle from the balcony was perfect. You could see David at the piano, see his hands moving, see the emotion on his face. The acoustics in the hall captured every note with crystal clarity. The piece built to its emotional peak, and Margaret watched David's whole body move with the music. His shoulders swayed slightly. His head tilted back. He was somewhere else entirely, lost in a world where cleaning carts and minimum wage and whatever burdens he carried didn't exist. Then, slowly, gently, the music came to its ending. The final notes hung in the air like a question no one wanted to answer. David's hand stayed on the keys for a long moment, his head bowed. His shoulders shook. He was crying harder now, making no effort to hide it or wipe the tears away. Margaret stopped recording and just watched. She felt like she was intruding on something sacred, but she couldn't make herself leave. After what felt like forever, David lifted his hands from the piano. He wiped his face with his sleeve, took a shaky breath, and stood up. He looked at the piano like he was saying goodbye to someone he loved. Then he turned back to his cleaning cart, back to being just the janitor again. Margaret ducked back from the balcony railing. Her mind was racing. Who was this man? Where had he learned to play like that? Why was he working as a custodian when he had this kind of gift? She waited until she heard his cart rolling away toward the other side of the building. Then she went back to her office, closed the door, and sat at her desk. She looked at her phone, at the video she'd just recorded. Her finger hovered over the delete button. This felt private, personal. Did she have the right to share this? But then she thought about all the times she'd watched talented people get overlooked because they didn't have the right connections or the right background or the right opportunities. She thought about how many brilliant artists were probably out there, working regular jobs, their gifts hidden because life had forced them to choose survival over passion. She thought about what her own music teacher had told her years ago, back when Margaret herself had dreamed of performing. Her teacher had said that talent without opportunity was like a light under a basket. It still shone, but only for the darkness around it. It needed someone to lift the basket, to let the light reach others. Margaret made a decision. She opened her messaging app and sent the video to herself as a backup. Then she watched it again, and again, making sure it was as powerful as she remembered. It was. God, it was beautiful. The next morning, Margaret got to work early. She found David in the break room, getting ready to head home after his night shift. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, but he smiled when he saw her. "Morning, Miss Chen," he said politely. Margaret's heart was pounding.
"David, do you have a minute?"
"I need to talk to you about something." The smile faded a little. He looked worried, like he thought he was in trouble. "Sure, is everything okay? Did I forget to clean something?" No, nothing like that." Margaret gestured toward her office. "Can we talk privately?" They walked to her office in silence. David looked increasingly nervous with each step. Margaret closed the door behind them and turned to face him. "David, I was here late last night," she began. "I heard you playing the piano." His face went pale, then red, then pale again. "I'm so sorry, Miss Chen. I know I shouldn't have touched it. I wasn't thinking. It won't happen again. Please, I need this job. My daughter, she depends on me." "I can't." "David, stop." Margaret held up her hand. "You're not in trouble. Just listen for a minute." He stopped talking but looked like he might be sick. Margaret took a breath. "I recorded you. I know I should have asked first, and I'm sorry. But David, that was the most beautiful thing I've heard in 15 years of running this place. Where did you learn to play like that?" David stared at her like she was speaking a foreign language. "You're not firing me."
Firing you?
"No, David, I want to help you. I want to understand who you are. Because what I heard last night, that wasn't just good. That was extraordinary." David sat in Margaret's office feeling like the walls were closing in. His mind was spinning. She'd recorded him. She'd heard everything. And now she wanted to know his story. He didn't know where to start. "I went to music school," he said quietly, his eyes fixed on his hands. "Years ago. Got a scholarship to the conservatory. I was going to be a concert pianist. That was the plan anyway." Margaret leaned forward. "What happened?" "Life happened." David's voice was thick. "My mom got sick. Had to drop out to take care of her. Then I met my wife, had my daughter. My wife passed 2 years ago. Cancer. Left me with a lot of medical bills and a little girl who needed her dad. So I worked 2 jobs. I clean here at night, stock shelves at the grocery store on weekends. It pays the rent. And the piano?" David shrugged, still not meeting her eyes. "Haven't really played in years. Not properly. Last night I saw it sitting there uncovered and I couldn't help myself. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. David, look at me." He finally raised his eyes to meet hers. "I want to post that video," Margaret said, "with your permission. I think people need to hear this, need to hear you." David's stomach dropped. "Post it, like online?" "Yes, I think your story matters. I think your music matters." "No." The word came out harder than he meant it to. "No, please."
"I can't. What if my boss sees it?"
"What if people think I'm trying to get attention? I just need to keep my head down and work. That's all I need." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something? When was the last time you did something just for yourself? Not for your daughter, not to pay bills. Just for you?" David didn't have an answer. "Think about it," Margaret said gently. "That's all I ask. Just think about it. I won't post anything without your permission. But David, you have a gift. And gifts like that, they're meant to be shared." David left her office feeling more confused than ever. He went home, checked on Lily with the neighbor, and tried to sleep. But all he could think about was that piano, and what Margaret had said about gifts being meant to be shared. 3 days passed. Margaret didn't bring it up again, but David could feel her watching him, waiting. Finally, on Friday night, as he was getting ready to start his shift, he found her in her office. "Okay," he said from the doorway. "You can post it." Margaret looked up, surprised. "Are you sure?" "No, but my daughter asked me yesterday why I always looked sad. And I realized she's never seen me play piano. Never seen that part of me. Maybe it's time I stopped hiding." Margaret smiled. "I'll post it tonight. And David, thank you for trusting me." She uploaded the video to the concert hall's social media pages at 8 p.m. She wrote a simple caption. "Our night custodian, David, has a secret. Last night I discovered him playing our Steinway after hours. This is what talent looks like when life doesn't go according to plan. This is what beauty sounds like when no one's watching. Listen." At first, nothing happened. A few likes from regular followers. A couple of shares. David went about his cleaning routine, trying not to think about it. But by midnight, something was changing. The view count was climbing fast. 100 views became 1,000. 1,000 became 10,000. People were commenting, sharing, tagging their friends. By morning, the video had been viewed over 200,000 times. David woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. Most were from numbers he didn't recognize. His neighbor knocked on his door, phone in hand, eyes wide. "David, you're on the news."
The actual news.
"They're talking about you." He turned on the television, still half asleep. And there it was. His face, his story. A local morning show was playing the video. The hosts were talking about him with tears in their eyes. "This is what so many people are going through," one host said. "Talented, gifted people who've had to set aside their dreams just to survive." David's story is touching hearts around the world this morning. Around the world. David felt dizzy. His phone rang again. This time it was Margaret. "David, are you seeing this?" "I'm seeing it. I don't understand it. People are responding to you. To your music. To your story. It's everywhere. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. The video's been shared over 50,000 times. News outlets are calling me asking for interviews. David, this is incredible." But David wasn't sure incredible was the right word. Terrifying felt more accurate. By afternoon, the video had hit 1 million views. Major news networks picked up the story. Good Morning America called. The Today Show called. CNN called. Everyone wanted to talk to the janitor who could play like a professional. The comments section was overwhelming. Thousands upon thousands of people sharing their own stories. Other musicians who'd given up their dreams. Parents working multiple jobs. People who saw themselves in David's struggle. "This made me cry," one comment read. "My dad gave up playing guitar to support our family. I never knew how much he missed it until now." "I'm a nurse who used to paint," another person wrote. "Haven't picked up a brush in 8 years." This video reminded me that it's not too late. This is real talent. Not manufactured, not produced. Just pure honest music. We need more of this. But there were other comments too. Offers. Serious offers. A music school in the city offered to give Lily a full scholarship. A local restaurant wanted David to play dinner music on weekends for more money than he made in a week at the grocery store. 3 different churches asked if he'd be their music director. People started a fundraising page without even asking him, trying to help with his bills. The most stunning message came on day 3. It was from Klaus Zimmermann, a world-renowned concert pianist who'd performed at the hall several times. He'd seen the video from his home in Austria. "I would be honored to work with you," the message read. "You have something special. Technical skills can be taught, but what you have in your playing, that emotion, that depth, it cannot be learned. It must be lived. You have lived it. I would like to help you share it. Please contact me if you're interested." David sat at his tiny kitchen table, staring at his phone, completely overwhelmed. Lily was doing homework next to him, humming to herself. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she knew people were saying nice things about her dad, and that made her happy. "Daddy, Mrs. Peterson at school saw your video," Lily said, not looking up from her math worksheet. "She said you play beautiful. She asked if you could maybe play at our spring concert." "Maybe, sweetheart." "Daddy? Yeah? Are you famous now?" David laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. "I don't know, baby. I really don't know." His phone buzzed again. Another interview request. Another opportunity. Another comment from someone whose life he'd apparently touched without even trying. The mayor's office called. They wanted him to perform at the city's annual gala next month. A huge event with donors, politicians, business leaders. Over 2,000 people attended every year. "I can't do that," David told Margaret when she called to tell him. "I can't perform in front of that many people. I haven't done a real performance in over 10 years. I'll mess it up. I'll disappoint everyone." "You won't," Margaret said firmly. "David, millions of people have already heard you play. You've already performed for the biggest audience of your life. And you know what? Nobody criticized your technique. Nobody complained about a single missed note. They celebrated your heart. They celebrated you. But what if you show your daughter that dreams don't die? What if you show her that it's never too late? What if you show all those people who commented on your video that they can pick up their paintbrushes or their guitars or whatever they left behind? David, this isn't just about you anymore." That night, David couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, listening to Lily breathe softly in the next room, thinking about everything that had happened in just 3 days. His whole life had been turned upside down by one moment, one decision to sit down at that piano. He thought about Jennifer. What would she say about all this? He could almost hear her voice. "Stop being scared and just play, David. Play like you did when I met you. Play like you're alive." At 3 a.m, David made his decision. He picked up his phone and sent a message to Margaret. "Tell the mayor I'll do it." The 3 weeks leading up to the gala were the longest of David's life. Every day felt like climbing a mountain he wasn't sure he could reach the top of. Margaret had arranged for him to practice at the concert hall during the afternoons, before his night shift started. The first few times, David's hands shook so badly he could barely play a scale. He'd sit at that beautiful Steinway, the same one where everything had started, and doubt would flood through him like ice water. What was he thinking? He couldn't do this. He was a janitor who used to play piano, not a performer. There was a difference, a huge difference. On the fourth day of practice, he hit a wrong note and stopped playing. He put his head in his hands and just sat there, breathing hard, feeling like he was going to throw up. "It's not working," he said out loud to the empty hall. "I can't do this." He'd made a terrible mistake saying yes. All those people who'd watched the video, who'd left encouraging comments, who'd shared their own stories, they were going to be so disappointed. The mayor's office would regret inviting him. Margaret would realize she'd been wrong about him. That night, instead of going home after his shift, David drove to the cemetery where Jennifer was buried. He hadn't been there in months. It was too hard, too painful, but tonight he needed her. He sat on the cold ground next to her headstone and talked to her like she was sitting right there beside him. "I don't know what I'm doing, Jen," he said quietly. "I'm scared out of my mind. What if I fail? What if I get up there and freeze? Lily will be watching. All those people will be watching. What if I let everyone down?" The wind rustled through the trees. A bird called somewhere in the darkness. No answers came, but David kept talking anyway. "You always believed in me more than I believed in myself. Remember when I was at the conservatory, and I wanted to quit because I didn't think I was good enough? You told me I was being ridiculous. You said I had magic in my fingers." He laughed, but it came out watery. "I wish you were here to tell me that now." He stayed there for over an hour, just talking, remembering, crying a little. And somewhere in that darkness, something shifted inside him. He couldn't explain it exactly. But when he finally stood up to leave, he felt lighter, clearer. The next day at practice, something was different. His hands were still nervous, but his mind was quieter. He started with simple pieces, things he'd learned as a teenager. Gradually, his confidence began to creep back. Not all the way, but enough to keep going. Margaret would stop by sometimes to listen. She never interrupted, just sat in the back row and let him work through whatever he was working through. After one session, she came down to the stage. "It's sounding good," she said. David shook his head. "It's sounding okay, not good. There's a difference." "David, can I tell you something? That video has now been viewed over 15 million times. Do you know why? Because people like viral videos? No, because you weren't trying to be perfect. You were trying to be honest. That's what moved people. Not your technical skill, though that's impressive. What moved them was feeling your heart in every note. Don't lose that trying to be flawless." Her words stuck with him. That night, he tried a different approach. Instead of practicing the same pieces over and over, trying to get every note exactly right, he just played. He played what he felt. He played for Jennifer. He played for Lily. He played for that scared kid who'd won a scholarship years ago. He played for the exhausted man who'd cleaned floors to keep his daughter fed. And suddenly, the music flowed the way it used to. But as the gala got closer, a different kind of fear crept in. Memories he'd buried started surfacing, painful ones. He remembered being at the conservatory, surrounded by students from wealthy families who'd had private lessons since they were 5. He remembered feeling like he didn't belong, like he was always one step behind, always trying to catch up. He remembered his favorite professor telling him he had potential, but needed to work harder, practice more, be better. He remembered the day he'd walked out of that building for the last time, carrying his few belongings in a backpack, knowing he might never come back. How he'd sat on the bus and watched his dreams fade into the distance through the window. He remembered working his first day at a warehouse job, his hands aching from lifting boxes instead of playing music. How he'd come home to his tiny apartment and stared at the old keyboard in the corner, the one that sounded tinny and cheap, and thought about selling it because what was the point? He remembered Jennifer finding him like that one night, after his mother had passed and the medical bills kept coming. He'd been crying, overwhelmed by everything. She'd held him and said, "David, you're so much stronger than you think. You're doing what needs to be done. That's not giving up. That's growing up." But it had felt like giving up. It still felt like giving up. 1 week before the gala, David almost called the mayor's office to cancel. He had his phone in his hand, the number pulled up, his finger hovering over the call button. Then Lily came into the room wearing her pajamas, holding a drawing she'd made at school. It was a picture of him sitting at a piano with a huge audience clapping. She'd drawn hearts all around it and written at the top in her careful 8-year-old handwriting, "My daddy is brave." David looked at that drawing for a long time. "Do you really think I'm brave, sweetheart?" he asked. Lily nodded seriously. "The bravest." Mrs. Peterson said being brave means doing something even when you're scared. You're scared, but you're doing it anyway. That's super brave. David pulled her into a hug and held on tight. Kids had a way of cutting through all the noise and getting straight to the truth. That night, after Lily was asleep, David sat at their small kitchen table and really thought about what he was doing. Not the performance itself, but what it meant. Why it mattered. This wasn't about proving he was good enough. It wasn't about impressing anyone or making up for lost time. It was about showing Lily that it's okay to try again, that it's okay to want something just for yourself, that dreams don't have an expiration date. It was about showing all those people who'd commented on the video, who'd shared their own stories of abandoned dreams, that picking up the pieces was possible. That it was never too late to remember who you were before life got complicated. And maybe, just maybe, it was about forgiving himself for leaving school, for the years of just surviving instead of living, for letting the music go quiet. The day before the gala, Klaus Zimmermann, the famous pianist from Austria, video called him. They'd been emailing back and forth, but this was the first time they'd spoken face to face. "I wanted to wish you luck tomorrow," Klaus said in his thick accent. "But more than that, I wanted to tell you something. I have played in the greatest concert halls in the world. I have performed for presidents and kings. But your video, David, it reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place. Not for the applause or the fame, for the feeling. You have not lost that. Many professional musicians have. You are richer than you know." After the call ended, David sat in silence. A concert pianist who'd performed for presidents thought he was rich. Not in money, obviously. In something more important. The morning of the gala, David woke up early. He made Lily her favorite breakfast, pancakes with too much syrup. A local boutique had donated a beautiful dress for her to wear, and she kept spinning around in it, making the skirt flare out. "I look like a princess, Daddy." "You look perfect, baby." As the day wore on, David felt surprisingly calm. Not fearless. He was still scared, but it was a different kind of scared. The kind that meant something important was about to happen. Margaret had arranged for a suit to be delivered to him. It fit perfectly. When he put it on and looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. He looked like someone who belonged on a stage, someone who had something to say. That evening, standing backstage at the concert hall with Lily beside him in her princess dress, David took a deep breath. He could hear the crowd gathering outside. Over 2,000 people. The mayor, business leaders, reporters, everyone who mattered in the city, and all of them were there to hear him play. Lily squeezed his hand. "Daddy, are you ready?" David looked down at his daughter, at her trusting eyes and her proud smile, at this little person who'd watched him work himself to exhaustion every single day and never once heard him complain, who deserved to see her father be happy. "Yes, sweetheart," he said. "I think I am." The stage manager gave David a 5-minute warning. Through the curtain, he could hear the crowd settling into their seats. The murmur of thousands of conversations blending together. Laughter, the rustle of programs. The sound of a world that was about to stop and listen to him. Lily had been escorted to a special seat in the front row, right next to Margaret. Before she left, she'd hugged David so tight he thought his ribs might crack. "Play the pretty song, Daddy," she'd whispered, the one that makes people happy cry. Now David stood alone in the wings, watching the stagehands make final adjustments to the piano. The same Steinway where this had all started, where he'd played when he thought no one was listening. When he'd just been a janitor stealing a moment with an old dream, his hands were sweating. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Part of him wanted to run. Just turn around and walk out the back door and keep walking until he disappeared. But then the lights dimmed in the auditorium. The conversations died down. The moment was here. The mayor walked out on stage to introduce him. David could see her from the wings, standing in a spotlight, smiling at the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we have something very special. Many of you have seen the video that's touched hearts around the world. The janitor who played piano when he thought no one was watching. Well, tonight he's going to play for all of us. Please welcome David Harrison." The applause started before he even stepped out. It grew louder as he walked across the stage. David's legs felt like they might give out. The lights were so bright he couldn't see individual faces, just a sea of people rising to their feet. They were giving him a standing ovation, and he hadn't played a single note yet. He reached the piano and stood there for a moment, completely overwhelmed. The applause continued on and on. Some people were already crying. He could see them wiping their eyes. Finally, the crowd began to quiet down. People sat back down. The auditorium fell silent except for a few coughs and the rustle of someone's jacket. David sat at the piano bench. He adjusted it slightly the way he always did. His hands hovered over the keys, trembling. He took a breath and closed his eyes, and then something unexpected happened. The fear didn't disappear exactly, but it changed. It became something else. Energy. Purpose. He thought about everything that had brought him to this moment. His mother's illness. Jennifer's death. The bills. The exhaustion. The years of pushing down who he used to be. The late nights cleaning floors. The video. The millions of people who'd watched and seen themselves in his struggle. He thought about Lily in the front row, probably bouncing with excitement in her fancy dress. His fingers touched the keys. The first note rang out, pure and clear. Then the second. Then the third. David had chosen a piece he'd written himself years ago, something he'd never performed for anyone. He'd composed it during one of the hardest times in his life, when Jennifer was sick and they didn't know if she'd make it through the treatment. He'd never given it a name, but in his head he'd always called it Hope in the Dark. It started soft and sad, like a question being asked in an empty room. The melody wandered uncertain, looking for something it couldn't find. David's hands moved across the keys, and he forgot about the audience. He forgot about the cameras recording this. He forgot about being scared. He just played. The music began to build. Layers added on top of layers, the left hand providing a steady heartbeat, while the right hand told the story. It was a story about struggle, about grief, about working 2 jobs and wondering if you'd make it to next week, about holding your daughter while she cried for her mother and not having any answers. People in the audience were utterly still. Even the coughers had stopped coughing. The only sound in that massive hall was David's music. Then the piece shifted. The minor key gave way to something brighter. Not happy exactly, but hopeful. It was the sound of sunrise after the longest night, the sound of your kid laughing after weeks of sadness, the sound of remembering that you're still alive, still here, still capable of feeling something other than tired. David's whole body moved with the music now. His shoulders swaying, his head tilting back at the emotional peaks. Tears were streaming down his face, but he didn't care. This was why music mattered. This was what it was for. Not to be perfect, not to impress anyone, but to take all the feelings that were too big for words and give them a voice. The piece built to its climax, his hands flying across the keys, every note exactly where it needed to be, not because he'd practiced it 1,000 times, though he had, but because he felt it. Every single note came from somewhere true, and then slowly, gently, the music came back down. It ended the way it had begun, with that same questioning melody. But this time it didn't sound lost. It sounded like someone who'd found their way home. The final note hung in the air. David's hands stayed on the keys. He sat there, breathing hard, his whole body shaking. For a moment there was absolute silence. Then the auditorium exploded. The sound of 2,000 people applauding, cheering, crying. David looked up, shocked. Everyone was on their feet again. People were shouting. He could see Lily jumping up and down in the front row, clapping her hands over her head. Margaret was crying. The mayor was crying. Half the audience seemed to be crying. The applause went on and on. David stood up from the piano, overwhelmed. He didn't know what to do with his hands. He settled for a small bow, which made the crowd cheer even louder. Someone threw flowers onto the stage. Then someone else. Soon there were roses everywhere. David looked out at all those faces, all those people who'd taken time out of their busy lives to come hear a janitor play piano, and he realized something. This wasn't just his moment. It was theirs too. Every person in that audience who'd given up on something they loved. Every parent who'd sacrificed their dreams so their kids could eat. Every person who'd worked jobs they hated to pay bills they didn't want. They were all here seeing that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. Backstage, after the applause finally died down and the crowd began to leave, David was surrounded by people. The mayor wanted to take a photo. Local business owners wanted to shake his hand. 3 different orchestra directors were trying to give him their cards, but David only had eyes for one person. Lily pushed through the crowd and launched herself into his arms. "Daddy, you were so good." Everyone was crying. "You made them happy cry just like I said." David held her tight. This little person who'd given him a reason to keep going when everything fell apart. "Did you like it, sweetheart?" "I loved it. Can you teach me to play like that?" David's throat got tight. "You want to learn piano?" "Yes. I want to make people happy cry too." Over the next few weeks, David's life changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. 3 major symphony orchestras offered him positions, but he turned them all down. The money would have been incredible, but the touring schedule would have meant leaving Lily for weeks at a time. That wasn't a sacrifice he was willing to make anymore. Instead, he accepted a part-time position with the city's symphony. It paid well enough that he could quit his grocery store job. He kept his custodian position at the concert hall, but Margaret adjusted his hours so he could practice and teach during the day. Because that was the other thing David decided to do. He started teaching piano to kids whose families couldn't afford lessons. He held classes twice a week in the concert hall's smaller practice rooms. Within a month, he had 15 students. Within 3 months, he had a waiting list. The fundraising page that strangers had started for him reached over $100,000. David used some of it to pay off the last of Jennifer's medical bills. The rest he put into a foundation to provide music lessons and instruments to children in underserved communities. Klaus Zimmermann came to visit from Austria and spent a week working with David, helping him refine his technique. They became friends, these 2 pianists from such different worlds who both understood that music wasn't about perfection. It was about truth. 6 months after the gala, David performed his first full concert as an official member of the city symphony. Lily sat in the front row again, wearing another pretty dress, this time holding a bouquet of flowers to give him afterward. Before the concert started, David stood backstage like he had that first night. But this time the fear was gone. In its place was something much better: gratitude, joy, peace. He walked out onto the stage and the applause washed over him like a warm wave. He sat at the piano and placed his hands on the keys. Before he began, he looked out at the audience and spoke into the microphone. A very wise 8-year-old once told me that being brave means doing something, even when you're scared. I spent a lot of years being scared. Scared to hope, scared to dream, scared to be anything other than what life had forced me to become. But music doesn't give up on you even when you give up on it. It waits, and if you're lucky enough to find your way back, it welcomes you home. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. This is for everyone who thinks it's too late. It's not. It's never too late. Then David began to play, and the music filled every corner of that beautiful hall. It wasn't the song of a janitor or a struggling single dad or someone who'd given up his dreams. It was the song of someone who'd found them again, and that made all the difference.